Welcome to Ladies Talking Love, Season 2, Episode 21, Talking with Teens About Masturbation. It's Ladies Talking Love, a community of women uncovering more joy and fulfillment in sex as we learn from experts and amazing women like you. Together, let's create a world where women's sexuality is celebrated and understood, beginning with our own. I'm your host, Ariel Finlinson. Let's talk love. I was grateful that we were able to break this episode into two to talk about younger kids and then to talk about teens. And Dr. Busby does such a great job, especially bringing home the point that it's most important to have a relationship with your children and to create a space where they want to come to you and they feel comfortable and that you can be a guide to help them figure out their own problem solving. Dr. Dean M. Busby is currently a professor in the School of Family Life at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. He has taught and been in administrative positions at a number of universities, including Brigham Young University, Texas Tech University, and Syracuse University. In more than 3 decades as a scholar, he has published more than 120 articles and book chapters and 5 books. His recent research has centered on the development and maintenance of sexual passion in marriage and development of healthy sexuality in families. Due to his past and present scholarship, he has developed into one of the foremost scholars on the factors that lead to successful marriage. He has been married to his wife, Colleen, for 38 years, and they enjoy their family of 3 sons and 10 grandchildren. I just wanted to remind you that we are coming to the close of Season 2. So look for one more episode in 2 weeks, and then we will resume Season 3 at the end of August, beginning of September. I haven't exactly decided the precise date. So follow us on Instagram at ladies.talkinglove to keep learning during the break and also to know when Season 3 launches. Before jumping in, though, I wanted to give those of you, especially who listened to the previous episode about talking with young children about masturbation and what to do when you see them self-touching. Here's a quick excerpt from the previous episode that I think is also such an important point going into talking with teens.
When a child does come to you, this is a really important moment, probably more important than anything else you can do around sexuality. When a child comes to you and says, I'm having problems with this. This can be now about adolescence. I can't stop thinking about this. I read this story in class and it makes me aroused, etc. When they come to you and you want to just give them a giant hug and say, I'm so happy that you feel comfortable coming to me and talking to me about this. And you want to make sure they understand that that is one of the best things they can do in their life. It makes me feel so much trust towards you that you can do this. And thank you. And so then you've made that way bigger than whatever they need to talk about. And so then you can turn to that and you can talk about it. But mostly you just want to reward that they come to you.
But without further ado, let's talk love. As we're moving into older children, what are some ways that we can work with them if we have a child who's continued this, or like you said, moving into puberty, maybe it comes back and they're self-touching again?
The biggest and most important thing about adolescence and masturbation is you can pretty much assume that the majority of your kids are going to masturbate. So just expect it to happen. So then if you know something is going to happen that you don't want to have happen, what do you do as a parent? You pre-arm them. You get them at the age of 8, 9, 10, 11. You've already started conversations about this. They know their bodies are going to change. They know they're going to have strong feelings of arousal. They know they're going to want to touch themselves, and that some people might even suggest that that's fine and that's appropriate and that's a way to release sexual tension. You've started all these conversations way before 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. That's when the typical child starts to masturbate more regularly in a more of a adult way in a sense.
A sexual way. Yeah.
And so you've got to start these conversations way before that, and always again ask them to come and talk to you when they feel this temptation or desire, or even do something there that you want to begin to talk about, and that it's hard. And so you've laid the groundwork for this idea that self-touch is going to be something they want to do, and they may even slip up and do. And then what are they going to do about it? They're going to have a conversation with you, and they're going to start talking. And so it's pretty rare, to tell you the truth, for a parent to catch their child in adolescence masturbating. It's very, very rare, because by then they've learned how to do certain things in secret. And so that's sort of a different issue when you catch your child doing something as an adolescent. It's even more challenging than when you catch them as a young child, because at some level, these are private behaviors, aren't they? They're beginning to explore their sexuality, and you've caught them exploring their sexuality, and there's going to be this feeling of violation of their personal space.
Mm-hmm.
You have a right as a parent to intervene. I'm not saying that at all, but there's going to be that additional sort of difficulty that you're going to experience. So what you want instead is to be having conversations about sexuality, asking about masturbation in a way they can talk to you about it. As soon as all of my kids got to that age, we'd already had all these other conversations about sexuality, and I began to ask them, usually monthly, I would make sure that I had a time to spend with them where we could walk and talk or be together and just talk about their whole lives. And some part of that conversation was always about sexuality. And that was every single month. And so they knew that was part of our conversation. And I hope was that then they would feel comfortable talking about challenges that they were having with arousal, with attraction to friends, and what other kids were doing about sexuality that confused them, all of those sorts of things. So you have this really open conversation about how sexuality is beginning to emerge in their lives. The challenge you have with adolescent masturbation is that it adds to the physical pleasure that they had as a child to now we're talking about neurotransmitters and dopamine and testosterone and estrogen and those strong hormones that all work together to create a reward system in the brain around sexual arousal. And so you now have a situation where, again, I would expect most kids are going to spend some amount of time with masturbation and working through that. And some of them are going to be pretty habitual about it. And if not even the majority, especially of males, there's certainly a significant number of females that also masturbate regularly, but it's much more common in males. In fact, most people say almost all males somewhere in that adolescent timeframe will have some struggles with this behavior. So that sort of changes the way we want to think about it, that we want to appreciate that this is a common struggle. If we make this a huge issue, what we're going to do is create a problem with our children feeling like they are okay spiritually and in other important ways in their life, okay with who they are and what they're doing with their sexuality. I don't know if I'm saying what I'm trying to get to here well. I hate to use food analogies with sex, but we'll do that. Anyway, all of us struggle with food. We struggle with food in some way, shape, or form. Everybody does, because it's an appetite. And so something about our eating is not in line with our ideals. We eat something too much, we eat another thing not enough. We're not eating as healthy as we can, and we're not helping our bodies the way we can. Everybody has this struggle, right? Some people really have this struggle a lot, and their health is really impaired. Other people just have it a little bit. And so if we can think about masturbation in that same way, then we approach it like we would with the lifetime teaching of our children about how to eat healthy and take care of their bodies. So how to be healthy sexually and how to take care of your sexuality is this process. You have an appetite, you sometimes overindulge, you have some side effects for that, you don't feel good about it, but you keep at it, you still have the appetite, you still have to deal with it. You're going to return to the temptations, the things that you eat that are not necessarily healthy, and you're going to consistently want that donut, right? And even though one donut pretty much knocks me out, and whatever. And so that's the way that parents have to grab a hold of this thing with masturbation, or they're going to drive it more into secrecy, and they're not going to have these crucial conversations.
And I really like the idea of making sure your kids know that it's a process too, that all of us go through a process of figuring out what our sexuality is, what it feels like, and how we can take our values in our life and put it with our sexuality and find a balance of how we can feel good with both of those things. Our desire for closeness and pleasure, but also our values, religious or other personal values. And before we jump into a little bit of how you might problem solve with adolescents, can you maybe just give a brief explanation of what about parents who are listening who are like, oh, great, my kid's gone through puberty and I haven't started those conversations. How can I start that with them, even if I haven't started when they're young?
Well, as my colleague, Laura Walker, who focuses on parent-child relationships the most and studies sexuality, says it's never too late, and it always can be helpful if you persist. So what you want to do is just start the conversation. And so if your child is 15, 16, 17 now, you've never had these conversations, start having them. And start out with owning your problem. We should have been talking about this stuff for a long time. I don't know why I'm uncomfortable with it. I'm still trying to grow myself. And I'm sorry we haven't had those conversations, but I want to start having them. And I know it's going to be uncomfortable for a while until we get used to it.
We'll practice.
Yeah, just do it. And they will say, I don't want to. And why do we have to talk about this? And say, because it matters a lot. And I love you. Yeah. And I want your adult relationships to be healthy. That's why. And so let's just plow through it. And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry it's uncomfortable.
Push through, start it. No, I'm so glad that you cover that, because I know that can be hard for some parents, like, but I didn't do it. Where do I start? But yeah, just starting. We're going to make mistakes along the way, all of us, but just to start that conversation with our kids. So what are some ways you might problem solve with adolescents who then come to us, or maybe we realize like this is an issue that's going on? How do you problem solve with them?
When you have a habit that's highly rewarding, one of the hardest things for us to get our heads wrapped around is when we intensely focus on stopping that habit, we actually make it worse. It's 100% clear, this habit control sort of process that we have. So if you build this thing where now you've identified there's a problem with masturbation and the child says they want to stop, you want them to stop. But if what that means is you're now having weekly talks about masturbation and whether they did or they didn't, or even daily talks, your relationship around them, around sexuality, is beginning to be primarily focused on masturbation, you're in trouble.
Like, don't think about pink elephants.
Yes, yes. So you've turned everything into this thing about masturbation, and you've given it so much weight that it's too powerful. And so then they will begin to define themselves by whether or not they are successful with dealing with masturbation in a particular day, week, or month. And more importantly, they'll begin to define sexuality as this thing that is making me do bad things that I can't stop, and I'm failing in life. You never want it to go to that place.
Can't control.
Yes.
Is that part of it as well? Yeah.
And this is a place where I would talk specifically about the process. So what do you want them to do is to help them identify the process, like what happens before they masturbate, what leads them to feel like they want to, what are the triggers around in their world. And then when they haven't, even though they wanted to, what have they done to be successful with that? So you can identify those strategies and you can help them understand. And so essentially the idea is you want to stop them at the earliest triggers that they have. You want them to help them build strategies to stop the arousal process way, way earlier in the sequence. So if it is when they see something online late at night, okay, so you got all kinds of strategies there, right? One of the things we need to be thinking about is, should they be seeing things online at night? Should they have that kind of access? Is that best for them? And again, you want them to come up with a solution. So Have you been able to resist this stuff online? Well, almost never. Okay. So let's talk about a strategy we can come up with where you don't have as easy access to that. And maybe there's a certain time frame where we need to turn in our computers and our cell phones and put them in the public, whatever your strategy as a family is for managing media. You help them come up with what they think will be helpful, and then you help them implement it, and you add your suggestions along the way. And then you just check up with them occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
But most importantly, you say, I'm so glad that you're willing to work on this and you want to work on this. And I want you to know that however successful you are with this has nothing to do with how I feel about you and the love I have for you and how good you are as a person and how healthy you are. It's just a habit. And habits are hard to break. And sometimes they take a long time. Sometimes they don't take so long. We don't know how long this is going to take for you. But it's normal to have a habit. And it's normal to be struggling with that habit. And that has nothing to do with your value, how much we love you, how much God loves you, etc. You send all those messages repeatedly. And so, the idea would be they would check up with you. But frankly, with this problem, you're going to have to occasionally say, how's it going?
Just check in. Yeah.
And I'm not making so much progress. Okay, do we need to rethink and go over some more strategies? Or how are you feeling about it? Is this just one of those hard times? You want to talk about it next week? Give them room to, manage the relationship and the conversation, but let them know that you can't just, pretend it's not there and we're going to ignore it entirely.
And I think that's so powerful that we're helping them figure out the tools that they can use for themselves. Because that's the goal. We want them to be an individual who can figure these things out. But as a parent, we can kind of help them figure out some tools and be there to support them. And then as they get older, they'll be able to know, oh, this is what worked before if I encounter this again. I love all of those ideas that you shared. Before we're about out of time, but are there any last things that you haven't talked about that you would add?
Yeah, one big piece that I normally share with parents who feel to me like they're overly wrought about this problem is I ask them this question. If you were going to pick the different sexual problems that somebody could have, which would you pick? Would you want them to get somebody pregnant? Would you want them to have a sexual relationship that was casual with somebody else? Would you want them to have a problem with porn and all this? So I just kind of list out, and it's somewhere in that I throw in masturbation. And every single time they pick masturbation. If that's the problem they're going to have, I'll pick that one because it's the least thing to be alarmed about. It's still a problem. It's still something we want to work on, but it's nowhere near as bad as some of these sexual issues can be, like getting somebody pregnant, like getting pregnant, et cetera. All those kinds of things are just so much more potentially life-altering than masturbation. So, yeah, we have this habit. We want to deal with this, but let's put it in the context of if you're going to have a sexual problem, pick that one, and work on it and get better at it. But let's not turn it into the central issue about sexuality with this particular child or for you. And if you have feelings of disgust and repulsion about it, you've got an issue you need to deal with until you can talk to them and feel like this is perfectly normal, but it's something we need to work with and we're going to get better.
Yeah.
That sort of idea, I think, is pretty important for parents to get a hold of because typically people start talking about masturbation like it's this gateway drug or something. It's not. It's really normal, really common. And it doesn't mean they're turning into this or that, or they're going to be out of control. So it doesn't mean any of that. It just means they have a habit.
Yeah.
And, that's it. And so deal with the habit.
And use tools like you would with other habits. Thank you so much, Dr. Busby. This has been awesome. Where can we get more resources about this? And where can we find your work?
I focus mostly on couple relationships, but I have co-authored a book with Laura Walker and Shalom Levitt and Jason Carroll on a better way to teach children about sex. It has some material on masturbation in there and pornography and other common problems and maturation, how to talk to kids. That's probably one I certainly would recommend for highly religious folks. Of course, we were coming from that perspective as authors. My material is generally on couple relationships. And so we have a book on sexual wholeness and marriage and actually finishing a second edition now too. And Shalom Levitt, one of my friends and colleagues who does a lot of work with me in this area, has a number of podcasts on sexuality and mindfulness and sort of learning to think healthy about sexuality. So you can look up her name and she will have some material. I'm on a few of those podcasts.
Awesome. And Shalom has been on, so she's got a podcast on here as well. Thank you so much. This has been great.
All right. Talk to you later.
I know that this has been a topic that I've been really worried about going into motherhood and having children, talking to my young kids about masturbation, and especially thinking ahead for my teenagers, what that is going to be like. Because I do come from a religious culture where masturbation is not encouraged. And I don't want to bring shame in, but I have a lot of things from just my background that when masturbation occurs or self-touch in my kids, it's like this, what do I do? And so it's been so great to just have some thoughts from Dr. Busby, because I've had so many questions about how do I talk about masturbation within the values that I hold dear and that I believe, and to help my kids, if these are values that they want to live by, to give them tools and ways that they can understand masturbation and understand sexuality within these values and to be able to live by them if they choose. And I hope you know, like every episode, if you don't agree with everything that's shared, that is completely fine by me. I definitely try to bring on guests who have similar values and the things they're talking about, but there are still some things that are shared that I may not completely agree with. And even if they share my faith tradition, it's so important for me to look inside and see, is this a way that I choose to live my faith? And so even if this person is from your same faith tradition or they seem to have the same values, I think it's so healthy to look and question, because not everything that someone else shares is always going to be right for you and right for your family. But that being said, I hope that most of it will be. And most importantly, I really hope that this will give you some information to think about and talk about with your partner, because together you get to decide what's going to be best for your relationship and your family. As always, thanks for talking love. Thank you to all of you who listen and join me on this journey, and to our Ladies Talking Love team who make the podcast possible. Thanks to our sound wizard, Kimberly Demers, our newsletter guru, Lauren Barton, and our miscellaneous task whiz, Jana Norman. As always, thanks for talking love.